Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, May 14th. Derek Van Riper, Eno here with you. On this episode, we have some deep dive Astros talk later on in the show. Chandler Rome of The Athletic will join us for that. Cover a lot of ground with him. The team kind of in the middle right now that needs to do a few things better in order to become clear-cut buyers as the trade deadline approaches in 2.5 months. But tons of baseball news because just after we hung up with Joe Sheehan on our Tuesday episode, we received the press release that surprised many folks in the baseball world, less so given recent events than it probably would have had this come down even 6 months ago. But Commissioner Rob Manfred reinstated Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and 15 other players from Major League Baseball's permanently ineligible list. And to be perfectly blunt, there is no topic in baseball I enjoy talking about and reading about less than Pete Rose. And I think it's because my mind has been clearly made up. Like, it's very simple for me. Pete Rose bet on baseball as a manager. And that's the rule that you can't break in baseball. So to reinstate him even after his death seems like a very bad decision from Rob Manfred, point blank. And that doesn't even dig into anything else we've learned in the time since that ban came down more than 30 years ago about Pete Rose's life. And those details, right? Allegations of a sexual relationship with a minor, like that, makes him irredeemable to me. I don't want to show grace to a person with those allegations. So it's a non-starter for me. And it leads to a bunch of other questions like, well, why would Manfred do this? What's in it for him? And people are asking now, does Pete Rose get a chance to go to the Hall of Fame? Short answer, yes, he does ultimately have the window. It's open now for that all to happen. So I'm curious, do you have the same kind of snap reaction to any Pete Rose story that I do? Or I'm like I've already decided I'm not moving off my position. I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. There's a character clause in the Hall of Fame. That matters. We know what we know. That matters. Where are you at here?
I definitely started in that same standpoint. I think I will end there, but I always try to be carefully considerate. I am the king of waffles, and so I tried to listen and read. And one thing that I noticed was that a lot of people that played with him or played against him felt that this was the right move. So there was definitely a lot of respect for him as a player, and former players and managers of that time frame welcomed this move. I'm painting them with a broad brush here, but that's what I read when I read these pieces that we've had up. That's what Bob Melvin said. It's like, I don't know. He literally said, I don't know why they waited this long. He's one of the greatest that ever played, and he deserves to be in. That's been sort of a way. I'm paraphrasing Bob Melvin, but that's been sort of the feeling I've gotten from people who've played. And so there's that. There's the fact that I've struggled personally with the character clause in the Hall of Fame vote. I do think he will not receive my vote. And I'm going to stick with that. There's just the dirtiness of how this fits in with not only political pressure from our nation's president, but also just the fact that we're maybe in bed with gambling now in a way that we weren't before. And I don't know, we want to keep up. He's, out of one side of his mouth, he's saying, I'm going to parse the word, permanent to mean ends at death. He's, as Hannah Kaiser pointed out very astutely, this is a lawyer, Rob Manfred, talking in lawyerisms about how, he is now going to consider a permanent ban ending at death. That is the quote unquote ruling that has happened here. And then on the other side of their mouth, be like, oh, the people who are on the permanent ban list now are staying on there because we want that to be a major deterrent to them. On one hand saying we've got to get, anybody who's gambling on baseball out of baseball. There are people who are banned right now who bet on baseball in the minor leagues during COVID when there was no baseball, who are banned because we want to say, no, you can't bet on baseball. But then the number one guy who broke the number one rule that's in the clubhouse, every clubhouse, we're going to reinstate him. Like most of it just makes me angry. The last quote, you mentioned grace. And this is one of the hardest things to do, is to show grace when you have no inclination to show it. You know what I mean? And Mike Schilt, so he didn't know about the particulars. I'm paraphrasing here. Here's the part I want to actually say exactly what he said. What they did relative to how they have been judged and how they are now judged is not for me to say. This is Mike Schilt about this ruling. But I will say this. Grace is important. I think grace is a really important thing. Clearly, they made some mistakes, and now they're getting some grace. For me, I don't think there can be a shortage of supply of grace in this world. And then he was asked by Dennis Lin, who was, I think by Dennis Lin, but I think it was in Scrum. He was asked, why is grace important? Because we're all broken, man. And that is the only place that I can find any solace with this. Pete Rose is not here to enjoy this, and he was obviously a flawed person. And maybe this brings some positive closure for his family. And there's some element there where there is going to be joy among the people who played him, and they think of him as a player and not necessarily as the person. And that's the little slice of joy I can find in all this.
Yeah, I just think for me, if to show grace, I need to see remorse first. I feel like Pete Rose never expressed remorse about any of the terrible things he did. That's just how.
Point.
That to me is sort of like step one. You want grace? Show remorse. Now, the Hall of Fame candidacy, Rose will be considered by an era committee, right? So Dick Allen and Dave Parker were just voted in last December by an era's committee. Those committees are made up of 16 people, members of the Hall of Fame, baseball executives, and veteran writers. So I don't think you'll get old enough fast enough to be on the committee. So this one won't be.
But I do think that the committee might be predisposed to putting him in. Just guessing from the quotes that we're seeing from veteran players.
Right. And Jason Stark pointed this out. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens have been eligible too. Shoeless Joe Jackson, who was also reinstated as part of this, has been eligible in the past, and they have not been voted in by these committees so far.
I would hope that they would, because I think steroids is not quite as bad as betting on the games you're managing or playing in.
I would agree with that. So it's not the end of the story, to say the least, but it was a big deal. And as far as the other players, 16 others, they weren't all players actually, but the 16 other people reinstated by Commissioner Rob Manfred, that deserves like a separate conversation. Their stories, I feel like, deserve more attention than being a footnote under Pete Rose's reinstatement. So I think we'll save that.
But they threw a World Series.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a series of, oh well, we should. No, I don't think so.
They threw it. They threw the game for money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Let him back in, I guess.
Yeah. Look, again, it comes back to the why do this. This is about political points. Maintaining the antitrust exemption. It comes back to
that is
power and money. Yeah. It's not about the issue itself as far as Rob Manfred goes. I think the dollar comes first. That's everything you see in Manfred's actions. Put money over everything.
I think a lot of the bad stuff in baseball actually flows from that antitrust exemption. That's a longer story to unpack.
This is a loaded start to the show. But
yeah.
But as soon as that story broke, the audible it coming out of the office, I got the, are you okay? It's like, yeah, but no, but nah. So that's where we're at. And then there was other baseball stories, other news, the things we normally talk about on this show. Also, that didn't stop. So let's get through a few of those items here. Corey Seager is back on the IL with a hamstring strain. And, we're getting to the point now with Corey Seager where it's baked into our expectations and projections. It's known that this is just part of what you get. And now that he's 31 years old, especially, it's probably not going to get better as his career continues. We continue to see around the injuries one of baseball's premier hitters. Look at what he's done so far this year. It's only been 26 games. He's popped 6 homers. He's got the 15% barrel rate, low strikeout rate again. Corey Seager is an elite talent, but he is increasingly becoming one of those players who has well below average health. And it is extremely frustrating to see on an annual basis, because I think we're being robbed of a guy that maybe would be putting together Hall of Fame worthy stats over the course of this career. I feel like we're going to fast forward to the end of Corey Seager's career. Hopefully it's 8 to 10 years away and not 5 or 6, but we're going to say, yeah, if he just stayed healthier, he could have got there. I feel like we're right in the middle of that right now.
Yeah, I was just talking about this, at the game last night, a little bit about my personal inclination is to like whippy, kind of loose players. If you want a sort of example of what I'm talking about, maybe somebody like a Fernando Tatis, that body type where it seems like he can turn fast, but he also can react and move in different dimensions. And he just seems like a sort of whippy athlete. Seager is a little bit more to me like a tight athlete. And I don't know what the words are that I'm looking for. Like, I'm sure there are better words if you study this sort of stuff, if you're a trainer, if you're, a doctor, but he's tight. And I think that baseball does reward tight players, tight movers to some extent, because it's a rotational sport, right? And so Seager can move fast in a rotational way, and that is only a benefit to him. However, I think in this case, it has led to, if you look at where the injuries are, they're all sort of like core leg, like he's got a lot of, I think he's had 2 abdominal surgeries. He's definitely had hamstring, a lot of hamstring. A lot of this is the middle of the body and the engine for turning. I'm not suggesting that, what I don't know is, could he have the same body he has now and have the same strengths that he have now and not have the injuries if he changed something about the way he, practiced or worked out or whatever? I would suggest probably not, because he's been with the Dodgers and Rangers. He's had different trainers. He's had different people talking to him. I'm sure this is something he doesn't want to have happen, right? So he's thought about this. But there's something interesting to me there in terms of like the difference in body types and how that has maybe contributed to this injury problem.
I mean, yeah, you go back to the time with his Dodgers, he had that arthroscopic hip surgery way back then. I think that was 2018 now. It's several years in the past. You're right. It is a lot of stuff concentrated in that lower core around that area, and having leg problems. It has to all be related in some way, but I don't know if there's a way, if there's a combination of specialists out there that can find a way to train him differently and to keep that from being a problem. But
I'm always like, do yoga.
Yeah, just do yoga.
I'm sure he's tried yoga.
I think just do yoga is like 2 steps away from the just add a cutter suggestion. Learn to code. Like, if everybody on the planet did yoga, learned to code, and added a cutter, we'd be an unstoppable group of humans.
Amazing.
We would be amazing as a society. Wow, that's it. We should put that in a book, man. That's
a book, man.
Other news to get to here: Roki Sasaki placed on the IL with a shoulder impingement, and it's, to me, kind of
he should do yoga.
He should do yoga. Yeah. He should be doing yoga. He should also have a cutter.
Yeah. Well, we did. We just said he should have a cutter. Oh,
right. God. He should probably learn to code while he's on the IL, right? It'll help him post-baseball career. But like, realistically, I think the IL stint, and I'm not even suggesting it's a phantom IL or anything like that.
Yeah.
It sort of answered the question in the option C sort of way. I forget how many options we actually had last week. We talked about him with Trevor on our Thursday episode.
Or
send him down, bullpen. Option C, he's actually not healthy. And we had questions about Sasaki's health last year because the stuff tick down. And I would just say that based on what we've seen from him, that all tracks. Like, he's still probably not quite right. And while it seems like a relatively minor injury, at least as it's currently reported, I have that kind of ominous cloud in the back of my head saying, like, is this really going to be a quick turnaround, or are they going to maybe slow walk the recovery and maybe send him on a slightly longer rehab assignment, even if he's well enough to return at or near the 15-day minimum?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that kept me from putting him any higher, and I had him high because the preseason projections were so good, but one thing that kept me from putting him higher was I thought he'd top out at 120 innings or 130 innings, and that even probabilistic thinking couldn't push you past that, because you knew he had some injury scares in Japan, and he never really put up bulk over there. So, this is part of one of the downsides of drafting him early. The other is that, the fastball shape hasn't been there. So as he's dropped in velo from 98 in his first start to 94.8 in his last start, that's 4 ticks. Like, come on, that's a big deal, especially if you don't have good shape on your fastball. And you see the strikeout rates, like in his last outing, he didn't strike out a single batter. So, like, if I'm in a redraft and I don't have injury slots, I don't think I'm sticking around for this. If I'm in a keeper league, obviously, you just got to hold on, because there's still an elite splitter in there.
Yeah, I think you got the nudge you needed in redraft to move on if you don't have the benefit of IL spots. I think it was going to be hard to do that without an IL stint or a clear demotion to the minor leagues. Hopefully it turns out to be relatively minor, but again, the cloud of pessimism is creeping into the back of my head. I did see Ian Happ landed on the IL, which prompted the Cubs to call up Moises Ballesteros for his MLB debut.
Absolute unit.
Yeah. The Ballesteros, we saw him in the fall league. The game I saw, he didn't look great defensively behind the plate. That's one look. I'm not a scout, whatever. Off to a great start at AAA this year. Only a 10% K rate, 43.8% hard hit. He's popped 4 homers, stolen 3 bases. I think that's the interesting thing. We've seen it a couple minor league stops. Ballesteros steals some bases, and that is not something you would assume when you see him walk into the park.
No.
I'm not trying to make fun of him. I just think you just would expect a 0 in that column, and it's not.
Undercover athlete.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see like how much they're playing him without Happ, because they could actually use him a bit in the DH spot.
The combination of his strikeout rate and his batted ball quality is really enticing. And then on top of that, what's really interesting, and the walk rates have gone down a little bit as he's advanced, but he's always had at least average and sometimes plus walk rates, which is not what you often you get. Sort of, we were talking about Yainer Diaz, like the kind of guy who makes a lot of contact, makes hard contact, and has like a 4% walk rate, 18% strikeout rate. There are guys like that, but when you start talking about, let's give him, 18% walk rate and a 10% 18% strikeout rate and a 10% walk rate and quality contact, then you start putting him in like the real quality hitters in this league, and so there's real upside in the bat, even if there's real questions about this. And like another way you can say it is he has played now 4 plate appearances, but given how little he's played in the major leagues, he still has league average projections as a bat, like right off the bat. So that is really enticing. I like a lot about this. I'm not sure that I do see a place for him on this Cubs team once everybody's healthy, though, mostly because Seiya Suzuki is best cast probably as the DH. Michael Busch is playing well, and I don't think Ballesteros is unseating. Even if Carson Kelly is mirage right now, Miguel Amaya is good. I don't see Ballesteros unseating either of those guys. So without a major injury to Busch or Suzuki, I think this is a short-term thing.
But a temporary lift if you're looking for a catcher-eligible player who might play in the time while Happ is on the IL. Other news and notes on our way out of this segment here. Rich Hill is back. I can't believe that. That kind of got lost in the excitement of everything else happening on Tuesday.
Can't wait to see him in the clubhouse again.
I'm going to say Rich Hill does yoga, right? 45 pitching in the big leagues,
Yeah.
definitely does yoga. We can just assume that. We don't even have to verify.
That might be my first question.
First question. Like, what's your secret? You do yoga? I think the look on his face, if he doesn't, it's going to be great.
Yeah, he might not.
We did have one follow-up. Our episode on Monday, we mentioned a PED suspension for Addison Barger, and there was a lot of confusion, a few questions about that afterwards. We had to do some digging to follow up on this just because it was like a very lightly reported suspension that actually took place all the way back in 2019.
Yes, it's really strange because there isn't really a published story on it, and in fact, in some published stories that have a list of suspensions, he's not listed. So I get why we got some pushback. But if we did some sleuthing, you looked at his minor league transactions page, and there is a restricted list, a stint in 2019, and I checked with a source who did confirm that he was suspended in 2019 for amphetamines use. It's rookie ball. He's a young guy. We were even debating whether or not amphetamines use is a PED at some point in this conversation with my source. So maybe those things are mitigating. I think that's part of why we took that piece out of our edited podcast. But it is, I guess, a fact that there was a suspension, and it was under the PED program at the very least. But it wasn't for one of those words with lots of vowels in it that that we've come used to. Is something entirely different. So we still remain very positive about Addison Bumgarner. We still remain very positive about Addison Barger's future with the Blue Jays, and it's just hopefully just a sort of a footnote in his career.
Yeah, hopefully onward and upward. Seems to be the case in the years since anyway, and taking this opportunity with the Jays and running with. So just wanted to clarify that because there was some confusion about that coming off that episode on Monday.
Yes. And a little update from Eno in the clubhouse. Somebody asked me over at Little League the other day if Tyler Rogers, what happened with the white cleats, because Tyler Rogers used to wear white cleats when he pitched, and part of the idea maybe was that he releases the ball from near his feet, and so maybe that could be deceptive to the hitter. He no longer wears the white cleats. I asked him about it, and he said it's because the white cleats that they offer him are quote unquote plastic and somehow not comfortable anymore. And I said, well, did you notice a difference after you switched to gray? And he goes, not really. And he said, if I really needed white cleats to be in the big leagues, I think I'd be in trouble.
Fair.
So, interesting statement to say from a guy who probably has the weirdest, funkiest release point in baseball. But
I think we could give him that title. I think that's fair. But yeah, interesting that changed. That was a interesting theory, at least, as to why he was wearing them in the first place. I'm going to agree with Tyler Rogers on this one. I don't think that would be enough to flip the switch from non-big leaguer to big leaguer. Hiding the ball in your white cleats, as unusual as that delivery is.
I'm just happy there wasn't a rule change. I mean, there are rules about sleeves and tattoos and all sorts of things for pitchers. So I'm happy that baseball didn't come in and say you have to wear gray shoes now.
Yeah,
sir.
I'm actually a little surprised that wasn't actually what happened in this instance. Glad he just chose not to wear them on his own, because shoes are shoes, as it goes for baseball players. Now it is our pleasure to be joined by Chandler Rome. Chandler covers the Astros here at The Athletic. Chandler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. What's up?
The Astros are in a weird place right now. We started to wonder around this time last year if the dynasty was finally starting to crack a bit at the foundation, and they rallied back. They made the playoffs, got knocked out by the Tigers, so it wasn't quite the same exit from the postseason that we had grown accustomed to seeing from this franchise. And more change, of course, in the offseason, the big trade, sending Kyle Tucker to the Cubs, getting Cam Smith back as the centerpiece of that deal. Of course, got Isaac Paredes back in that trade as well. let's just start with Cam Smith. 30 games into his big league career, 30% K rate, but not really a surprise to see that for any player seeing big league pitching for the first time, especially when you consider how quickly he moved through the minors. What are you seeing from him on a day-to-day basis, and where do you think the Astros are at in terms of their comfort level with how he has started his big league career, given the importance he seems to have in this organization?
Yeah, we'll start with the positives first. He is a natural in right field. I think I looked at Sports Info Solutions DRS this morning. I think he's the 4th best right fielder in baseball. I think he's got like 5 defensive runs saved already. This dude was not playing the outfield until like 2.5 months ago. He is a natural out there. You can see his athleticism just kind of open up. Like, he is taken to it very quickly, to the point where the Astros are hitting him balls in center field. I don't think that's something they want to do in the short term, but I think it's something they're keeping their options open for maybe the long term. They're hitting him balls in center field. He has taken right field so well that they think he can translate to any position. So he's done very well defensively. The way he's handled himself, just his persona and the way he's carried himself on a day-to-day basis, he is not overwhelmed up here. Everyone in the clubhouse loves him. His makeup is off the charts. He is really ingratiated himself well into a big league clubhouse that has a lot of veteran players in it. But at the end of the day, you don't get lauded for makeup and stuff like that. You get lauded to produce, and he hasn't produced offensively. Nothing under the hood looks good either. If you look at his Baseball Savant page right now, it's a lot of blue. I think what he got lauded for in spring training so much was his discipline. He was laying off pitches. He was working long at bats. You could tell he could recognize pitches out of hand a lot quicker than maybe guys of his age and experience level. When he got to the big leagues, though, he tried to kind of mimic that, and I think the Astros want him to be more aggressive against pitches in zone, and that's been a little bit of a struggle for him. The hitting coaches have worked with him on getting his load and getting his hands started quicker, because Cam Smith even acknowledged, like, I think 3 weeks into his tenure, he's like, yeah, like I need to get started quicker up here. Like, my movements and my motions are not quick enough up here. I'm noticing that very quickly. So they've had to work with him a lot on like doing some different things in his stance, getting started quicker so he can be out in front of the ball. A lot of his contact is to the opposite field, which is kind of his MO, which we've learned that's the kind of hitter he is. But at some point, with a guy with this power, a guy with this looking like the way he looks, you kind of think he would pull a ball in the air every now and then, just kind of really hit a ball up the middle or to his pull side. And he really hasn't done that much. It's been a struggle offensively for him. But at the same time, when you watch his at bats, like, he's not overmatched. He's not swinging at things in the other batter's box. He's not pressing. He's not. This is not a kid that you look at, and if you would watch him for a week, say, oh, this kid needs to be in AAA. This kid needs to be in the minor leagues. I think that's going to end up being the ultimate destination here in the next couple of weeks, unless he really turns it on. But it's been an interesting thing to watch. He certainly doesn't look like someone that is ready to be an everyday player in the big leagues, but doesn't look overmatched either. It's been an interesting first 41 games for Cam Smith.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, one thing that I do want to point out, you're excellent on the zone situation. He is basically almost 10 percentage points below average on zone swing percentage. So we've been finding out here on this podcast that, putting together zone swing with chase rate is actually a better predictor than just looking at chase rate, because in his case, he's a little bit, overly passive. I just read an article on Fangraphs about how Trent Grisham is being more aggressive in the zone. And that's a big part of why he's breaking out. There's something in common here where he's an extreme not swinger. And so the other part is, you can look at his pull rates in the minor leagues. You're right. He did not pull the ball. We don't have a ton of minor league data, but he has a 31% pull rate in the minors last year. And 40% is league average. So, and he's pulled a little bit more in the bigs. I would say there's some interesting things under the hood, like being able to hit a ball more than 110 already means that there's some good bat speed in there. And I think you're right. Like it all seems like it's pretty decent, but a team like the Astros, who are 21-20, Maybe this 22-year-old should be in the minors. I thought he'd been doing enough to keep his head above water and keep that job. But outfielder, as an outfielder too, he's a little bit more replaceable. What kind of, I guess there's maybe a candidate on the same team to maybe take time away from him and Zach Dezenzo, or who is it that might push him off this roster?
Yeah, you're right on it. It's Zach Dezenzo, who an older prospect. I think he's 20. I think he's just turned 25. Actually, certainly doesn't have maybe the cachet that Cam Smith does. As it was prospect status type, but it's a guy they're very excited about. Hits the ball really hard. Puts together good at bats. Again, an older guy that has kind of outperformed the minor leagues and probably should be on the big league roster and he has acquitted himself as a guy that can play every day. Now, the last couple of days, Joe Espada has been able to play Cam Smith and Zach Dezenzo together because Yordan Alvarez is still on the IL and Jose Altuve had a hamstring issue that kept him out for a couple games. So Joe was able to make it work. But when this club's at full strength and Jose Altuve's in the left field, there's only one spot for those two guys. And it's interesting because Joe Espada maintained throughout spring training that they were not going to carry Cam Smith or Zach Dezenzo on the opening day roster unless everyday at-bats were available.
All right.
As we all know, the manager does not construct the roster. That is the general manager's job. And Dana Brown, he was very open about this. He wanted to reward spring training performance. He wanted to reward guys that went out in spring training and showed themselves well. Cam Smith got all the attention in spring training because of who he is. Zach Dezenzo had a better spring offensively, just stats-wise, than Cam Smith. So they carried them both, and predictably, it's been hard to get them both in the lineup. There was a point, Zach Dezenzo, they were very close to probably sending him out to get regular at-bats after the first 3 weeks of the season because Joe wanted to give Cam Smith the runway that a 22-year-old uber prospect kind of deserves, and there was no place to play Zach Dezenzo. But Zach Dezenzo's forced their hand the last 15, 20 games the way he's looked. I can see a scenario. I don't think it's imminent, but I can see a scenario within the next 2 or 3 weeks where if the Astros can find a left-handed bat somewhere on the waiver wire, if they can find someone in another org that they're willing to dump, I can see them making that swap, get a left-handed hitter in here, send Cam Smith to either AA or AAA, depending on what caliber of pitching they want him to face. Let him get everyday at-bats out there, maybe let him work in center field, let him work more in an environment where the stakes are not as high as they are in the big leagues. But again, let me reiterate, Cam Smith does not look like a guy that's overmatched. I just think right now, development-wise and skill set-wise, he probably needs to be working this out in the minor leagues.
It really does feel like it's sort of a week-to-week thing. We saw it last year in Milwaukee with Jackson Chourio. We saw it a few years ago, I think, with Bobby Witt Jr., his first year in Kansas City. You give rookies that have that high ceiling, you give them 6 weeks, 8 weeks sometimes to make the adjustments, and then things start to click. And I think they're right in that sweet spot right now where if in these next couple of weeks they don't get that next level they're hoping for, that could be something that leads them to give them at least a temporary look in the minors, especially if they're considering that move to center field, right? I think it's easier to get those reps in the minors than it is to get them at the big league level for the first time. But you've already mentioned the aptitude Cam Smith has shown for making those defensive changes. It seems like there's a lot of ceiling here for him to tap into. As far as Yordan Alvarez goes, I mean, he will come back from the IL soon. It sounds like Thursday against the Rangers is the most likely expectation for that. But what are the long-term concerns with this injury? They called it a right hand muscle strain. He just hasn't been himself so far this season. Is it this injury's been in the works for a couple of weeks? Is it something else that's been bothering him? What do you attribute the slow start to for Yordan?
He's had pretty chronic hand problems. He's dealt with hand problems maybe throughout his career, and he's needed days off. He's needed, I believe, at least one IL stint in the past for his hand. So this is nothing new. It's impossible to think that this didn't contribute a little bit to the slow start. Joe Espada has said as much. He doesn't want to put words in Alvarez's mouth. Alvarez hasn't spoken to us since he went on the IL. But, I mean, it seems logical that if he's been feeling this, that's probably why the numbers are down a little bit. You look at the underlying stuff, he's been a little bit unlucky. It hasn't been like drastic bad luck. But, I mean, the hard hit rate still looks about the same. He's chasing a lot more. His problem is he's hitting like 180 against fastballs. which is pretty un-Yordan Alvarez like, that, he's getting the same amount of fastballs that you would think, he gets normally, and he's just not doing much with them. He's not punishing fastballs like we have seen him do. I think part of it too, early in the season, no one in this lineup was hitting other than maybe Jose Altuve at the beginning, and Yordan Alvarez had Christian Walker and Yainer Diaz right behind him, both of whom were terrible throughout the first month of the season. So Yordan wasn't getting anything to hit. So I think that maybe contributed to it as well, that pitchers were just like, you know what, we're going to live on the edges. We're not going to come in zone, and we're going to just let Christian Walker and Yainer Diaz try to beat us behind you when they're in huge slumps. And I don't know if Yordan put some pressure on himself, knowing that, when no one else is going right, he's got to be the guy. So I think, you look at some underlying stuff. There is some luck involved here, and I think the hand has something to do with it. But Yordan's in that echelon where I don't want to be flippant, but also, like, if you want to be considered a top 5 hitter in baseball, like, you've got to be able to kind of overcome this stuff. The one pitch you're going to get to hit in your at bat, you got to do some damage with it, and he just hasn't been able to do it early. I would not bet against him. I would assume it's going to return and water's going to sink to its own level, but it has not been pretty to start the year for Yordan.
I did not know that he'd been dealing with hand stuff, because I always think of knees with him.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately you've got a lengthy list of injuries you can think about and associate it with Alvarez. And he's, again, I don't think it's like a chronic. It's not a hamate. We've asked that as many times as we can. I think it's just, he's got a couple things. He reported to spring training a couple of years ago and couldn't swing a bat for the first 2 or 3 weeks because of his hand. He's had a couple instances in season the past couple of years where he's needed like 2 or 3 days off, hasn't needed an IL stint. But I think at this point, with this one, from what I understand, I don't think the severity was as bad as, some other ones, but I think they said, you know what, it's May, whatever it was, like, let's get it right. Like, he's not producing now, like, let's get it right, let's give him some time. And I think this is a mental reset too, as maybe a physical reset for a guy that I think this is the second worst in April. It was the second worst month of his major league career, behind I believe August 2022. That was the only other worst month he's had in his major league career. He finished 3rd in AL MVP voting in 2022. So there is promise that this can turn around and he can get better, but it always kind of sticks out when it's at the beginning of the season.
And it really felt like this lineup was more top heavy than usual because of the Tucker loss and the amount they're putting on Smith, and having Alvarez not playing up to his typical level is having a pretty big impact. But it's not just him. You look at Jose Altuve, you mentioned Christian Walker before, Yainer Diaz. I think they're all underperforming their projections to this point. They've had Jeremy Peña playing at just a ridiculous level. He's on 25 homer, 25 steal pace, or very close to it so far. Have you seen anything in that group of Altuve, Walker, or Diaz that gives you pause, or is that just kind of your garden variety slow start to the first quarter of the season as well?
Well, I guess with Walker, it's a little bit like with Alvarez. He's not hitting fastballs. I think he's got around the same batting average Yordan Alvarez has against fastballs, around 180. The thing about Walker that's really kind of accentuated his slow start, he struck out 47 times this season. 30 of them have come with a runner on base. And he has hit 4th or 5th basically every game. And Joe Espada is giving a veteran guy, as much leeway as he can here. Also, I don't know who he would move up to hit in the middle of the order to replace him. But, Christian Walker has talked about, he has felt some pressure being the guy. I mean, he was their acquisition this winter, signed a 3-year, $60 million contract in a new place. They hit him in cleanup from day one, and there's been some pressure on him. And I don't think he's handled it, at least in the first month, as well as he'd like to. He looks better. He has looked better the last 3 or 4 weeks. The quality of contact, even when he was struggling a little bit, the quality of contact was okay. The chase is a little concerning. The whiffs have been a little concerning, but I don't think this Astros fans all automatically want to point to Jose Abreu and how quickly that went south. I don't think this is a Jose Abreu situation at all. If anything, if for no other reason than Christian Walker is still an elite defender at first base. He has completely helped to transform this infield defense. So he's still got that going for him. As far as Yainer goes, Yainer can be a difficult hitter to evaluate just because he's such a free swinger. He swings at everything, and he's kind of like Altuve in the fact that he can get his bat on pretty much anything. But he and Altuve, there's some parallels of when they're going poorly, like they get into major swing mode. They get into major press mode of swinging at a bunch of stuff, of not making pitchers come in zone at all. And Yainer has, again, I think you're seeing progress from both Christian Walker and Yainer Diaz, but they started off so poorly that the OPS numbers are going to be low until about mid-June, unless they keep, really sustain this production. So I don't think all is lost in either situation. I think they just had awful starts, and it really, really it accentuates when it's at the beginning of the season.
I mean, I think I'm a little bit worried about Walker and Altuve from an age standpoint, but I'm looking at his rolling chase rate, and he was not chasing like this at any point last year.
Walker or Altuve?
Christian Walker. So yeah. there's like a definitely a pressing situation for him there, and with Altuve, like he has seemed so ageless. Like he just seems like he's just going to keep on ticking forever. But I think that the power output is going to be where we see the most aging for him. Yeah. I mean, that's I often talk about the bell curve of a person's career, and like that's how Altuve came into this league, as a guy who might hit 7 to 10 homers a year. Now, I think he has figured something out that he won't ever go back to that level, but I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe never hits 20 homers again in his career in a single season. And of course the speed is going down too. So I think those are the two critical aspects that are affecting him. And also, like, he is such a nose to his toes swinger, that I wonder what will happen to his strikeout rate as he ages. It's just
you've already seen it increase. You've already seen it. Like the strikeout rate is through the roof. He had the highest strikeout rate of his career last year, I believe, and this year he's on pace to even shatter that. And yeah, I mean, that's been a talking point kind of in the city, is like, are we seeing the next, I don't want to say the decline. I don't think decline is the right word yet, but are we seeing him transition into the next phase of his career? We already are he's playing left field now. So, I mean, that's right. That's one big thing, but offensively,
the next one would be like moving him in the lineup somewhere else, and that's problematic right now because, as you say, like, where do you don't want to, you don't really have other options to push him out of the top of the lineup,
right? And it should be noted that he asked Joe Espada to move out of the leadoff spot. He said so he could have more time to run in from left field to the dugout. He got a little bit tired. Jose Altuve is really good at deflecting kind of storylines and stuff. Like, that's why that's according to him. That's why.
Not because I'm not playing though.
and he heaped praise on Jeremy Peña, who has been playing incredibly all season and has only taken off even more since he got in the leadoff spot.
Yeah, have you seen anything with Peña that's different? Has he changed anything in his swing, his setup, or is this just a guy that's got the experience starting to put all the pieces together? Because I think we entered this season on this show saying what you see is probably what you get. We had enough of a sample on Peña to say, okay, he's a good everyday shortstop, but he's not a star. He's not a top 10 guy at the position. And at least at the moment, he looks like he could easily be a top 10 guy at the shortstop position this year.
Peña has been such a fascinating player to evaluate since he got up with the Astros. Everyone looks at what he did in the 2022 postseason, and for good reason. ALCS MVP, World Series MVP. People forget. People don't look at his numbers before that playoff run. He was a league average hitter, just like he was in 2023 and 2024. He had the most well-timed heater I think anyone in baseball has ever had. And that puts expectations and pressure on someone that are basically unattainable. No rookie had done what Peña did. And I think what also gets lost is that this dude barely played minor league baseball. Like, I think he had like 180 total minor league games. He never played in AA. He played 30 games in AAA and then was the Astros starting shortstop on opening day.
He started 2021 in the complex for some reason.
So he broke his wrist. No, he broke his wrist in 2021. Missed most of that season. 2020 obviously didn't play at all. And then 2022, he's starting in the big leagues at shortstop. And I get he was an older draft guy, but he went to Maine. I don't know what conference Maine is in, but he wasn't facing anything great in Maine either. So while he was an older guy, while, he has the pedigree of having the dad that played in the big leagues, he has the bloodline, like he just hadn't played much. And I think that got lost in, the aura of what he did in 2022. And then as you looked at 2023 and 2024, like everything under the hood got better. Like a lot of his peripherals got better. The chase rates got better, everything. But what didn't get better was the OPS. What didn't get better was the slugging and the on-base percentage. So it didn't translate to results. He came into spring training last year, had overhauled his stance. He really quieted it down. He used to have a bat waggle like in the back. He quieted the bat down, was really kind of quieted things down. And, for the first 40 or so games of last year, he was excellent. Like he was almost hitting 400 after 40 games last year, and then it kind of fell off a cliff. So you take everything with a grain of salt as he's doing this the first 41 games of this year. But, you start to look at it, his swing rate is down almost 7%. He is not swinging near as much as he used to. His strikeout rate is down 6%. And he's one of the best hitters in baseball against four-seamers. He's got a run value, I believe, of 8 against four-seam fastballs. So he's getting fastballs. He's getting more fastballs hitting at the top of the order, and he's not missing them. And he's able to pick his pitch. He's staying in zone well. He's not chasing as much as he used to. I think it's real. But then again, I have seen Jeremy Peña go through these stretches where he looks like he's on the precipice of a breakout, and then it kind of goes away. So I'm not done trying to predict what Jeremy Peña is going to do, but just suffice to say, it has been difficult to analyze him from kind of a holistic standpoint since he became the Astros shortstop.
That's fair. And yeah, America East is the conference that the University of Maine plays. And it is D1 ball. But if you guys can name any other team in that conference, there are 8 total, I would be surprised.
Can I try?
Yeah.
Stony Brook?
No, that's a great guess, though, because the UMBC, UMass Lowell, Albany, Binghamton, Bryant, and New Jersey Tech are the teams in the conference right now.
New Jersey Tech. Wow. Okay.
Something tells me New Jersey Tech didn't have a guy throwing 95 on Friday night that Jeremy Peña could face.
Probably not. Maybe in the next 10 years. You never know. Everybody's throwing harder. So eventually velocity will peak at that level. But we're not there yet. Let's talk about things that are going right on the pitching side. Despite injuries, by WAR, the Astros have a top 10 rotation and a top 10 bullpen so far. But the injuries piling up early in the year was one of the scenarios that I thought could make things really difficult on this team. We're kind of seeing that now that Hayden Wesneski has joined Spencer Arrighetti on the IL. We've already seen Ryan Gusto come up, look good at first, had a rough outing last time out that has made the ratios look pretty ugly. If they have to dig deeper into their minor league depth for starting pitching, where do they go? Is there anybody on the radar that we should be excited about that could get an opportunity?
Well, AJ Bluebaugh came up already, made his big league debut in a spot start against the Tigers. He's on the 40-man roster, I'd imagine. Well, so I guess we should really start with who's going to pitch tonight. We're recording this on Wednesday, the last day of the Royals series. Colton Gordon will make his big league debut tonight in a spot start as part of this 6-man rotation. 27-year-old lefty from UCF, had Tommy John right when the Astros drafted him. So it was kind of a work in progress, an 8th-round draft pick. Going to throw strikes. He didn't appear in many prospect rankings kind of outside. So I think he's just kind of maybe a little bit more of an org guy. But, AJ Bluebaugh is a guy that they're pretty excited about. Came up, gave up 7 runs in his big league debut. Only 2 of them were earned. Jeremy Peña actually botched a double play behind him in an inning that really unraveled on him. So they're excited about him. Miguel Ulloa is a guy that's in AAA right now, striking out the world in the PCL.
How's the command?
Not great.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Not great, but they were really excited about him coming into spring training. Like he was the guy that they were all circling. Like, this is our next guy. He didn't pitch well in spring training at all. Got hurt in the spring breakout game. He started that game, had to walk off the mound with a shoulder injury, but he's better now. striking out the world in the PCL. So I would imagine he's probably on their radar too. And then if you want an under the radar guy, remember Tyler Ivey? Just he made a spot start in 2021 in Arlington, actually retired a few weeks after that, just kind of got burnt out with baseball, kind of got burnt out with trying to do everything. He made a comeback. And he's pitching okay in AAA's rotation. He's not on the 40, obviously, but an older guy that has pitched in the big leagues before. He's pitching okay in their rotation. If they get down to it, I could see Tyler Ivey getting a shot as well. They don't have, a lot of their guys in AA, I don't think are ready for like that Jake Bloss fast track. Remember that they fast tracked Jake Bloss last year when they needed a starter. You look at Jose Fleury, maybe him. He's pitched well for AA. Corpus Christi has a good changeup that a lot of people are excited about, but I think he's still a little ways away. So those are probably some names: Miguel Ulloa, Tyler Ivey, AJ Bluebaugh, and maybe Jose Fleury.
The sort of pecking order is fascinating to me because you have these org guys, you have these like, and this is about every team, not just the Astros, but you have this like, do we have a long-term opening in the rotation? Then we bring up, if you do, then maybe it's Bluebaugh, if I'm reading it correctly. Like if you had a long-term opening and you wanted to like, here's the next Astro, maybe Bluebaugh.
I would probably say Bluebaugh. I'd probably give Bluebaugh the nod over Gordon, but who knows? I mean, Gordon throws a bunch of strikes. He's an older guy that they like. I mean, it's not as if this is like a pity spot start. I mean, he's earned this. Like, it's not as if
looks like he throws six pitch types pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean, he throws a bunch. He's going to be around the zone. He's pitched in the WBC for Team Israel. He pitched in a sold out Lone Depot Park. I believe he faced the Dominican Republic. So he has been in big atmospheres, and I don't think tonight's going to scare him, so to speak. But yeah, I think if there was a long-term need, I think Bluebaugh is probably the guy that they would look to. But again, this farm system's not in a position where they're producing, guys that they can just plug and play, plug and go. But we say that a lot with this pitching infrastructure, and there's just guys that come out of nowhere that just somehow end up being really good. They're just really good at that. So there's probably someone that I have not even mentioned that I'm going to get a phone call about in like 2 days, be like, oh, hey, like you didn't talk about this guy. He's actually going to come up next week and we're going to spot start. And then somehow we'll be pitching like game 4 of the ALDS.
Yeah, right. Like the Blanco situation or whatever. But Gusto to me seems like a short-term patch because I look at his arsenal. It's like it's fastball heavy, and then the fastball when he's not in relief stints is not as good.
He doesn't have a ton of secondary stuff that misses bats. His fastball can miss bats, but the secondary stuff is just not evolved yet to the point where he has the one pitch he can go to get out of zone swings, things like that. So teams are forcing him to come in zone with a fastball. That is good. His four-seamer's good, and the numbers and the metrics suggest it's good. But when you're one-pitch pitchers don't survive in the big leagues for very long. And that's what Ryan Gusto, to this point, feels like. So he's got to evolve a little bit and maybe get the secondary and the spin a little bit better.
One last question before we let you go, Chandler, kind of looking ahead 2.5 months of the trade deadline, thinking about the Astros as a team that under Jim Crane's ownership doesn't really ever want to be anything other than a buyer. What upgrades do you think they'll be seeking between now and then to make this roster more equipped for their playoff run?
I mean, they're pretty obviously a bat short, hell, maybe even 2 bats short, and they're very, very right-handed now. With Yordan Alvarez is on the IL, which means 12 of their 14 position players that are active right now are right-handed hitters. And the 2 that aren't, one of them is a switch hitter and backup catcher Victor Caratini. And the only true left-handed hitter on the roster is Cesar Salazar, who is the 3rd catcher who is here for no other reason than to give Joe Espada coverage.
That is right-handed.
So, again, I wrote a story last week, how long can this go on? Because the Reds came to town last week, and they had Andrew Abbott slated to start on Sunday, a left-handed pitcher. And Terry Francona did what all of the 28 other managers in his league would do. Is I got a right-hander coming up, and we got an off day tomorrow. All right, Andrew Abbott, you're pitching Tuesday, and I'm pitching Chase Petty on Sunday, this right-handed pitcher. And look, the Astros killed Chase Petty, but it was his second big league start. But they're playing the matchup because like the Astros can't create a platoon advantage. Like Joe Espada is pretty handcuffed late in games. If they go to good leverage right-hand relievers, like he has nothing on his bench to counter with. Like, I don't know why a manager would willingly and choose to throw a left-handed pitcher against this team. So they need a left-handed bat, and they need it probably now. They can't maybe afford to wait until July, but presuming this is the roster they take to July and presuming they're in contention, a left-handed bat will be at the top of the list. You can never have too much pitching. You mentioned Hayden Wesneski's on the IL with quote elbow discomfort, end quote. Apparently the first MRI they took, the swelling and everything was so bad that they're going to have to let it calm down before they go back and look, which I mean, we can all kind of read between the lines on that. Again, I hope it worked. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Hayden can get back quick, but you have to plan as if that's going to be a long-term absence. And, Spencer Arrighetti still has a cast on his right thumm. Lance
McCullers is not looking great.
Yeah, it's 2 starts after 2.5 years away. They hope it can get better, but I don't know. And look, Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez, you put those two in the top of a playoff series and you feel really good. But I think
you have to get there first.
They have to get there. So like, I would think that, if they can find a Yusei Kikuchi type, maybe not give up what they gave up. I mean, now that trade has aged pretty well given where those 3 prospects in the Blue Jays system are now. But if they can find someone to just take the ball every 5th or 6th day, get them into the 6th inning and be okay. Like, I think they'd be open to that, but I don't know what they're trading because we have this discussion every year. This is, if not the worst farm system in baseball, the 2nd or 3rd worst farm system in baseball. They don't have much on the major league roster that would be maybe attractive to other teams. I don't know how other
the ones they want to keep.
Right. I don't know how other teams feel about Chas McCormick. I don't know how other teams feel about Mauricio Dubon, but like you start to look at the big league roster and it's like, there's not much they can trade from here. And then you go to the farm system. It's like, we've traded everyone we can. It's going to be a fascinating deadline. If they get to the deadline and they're, I don't know, 3.5, 4.5 games out of a wild card, like it's not in Jim Crane's DNA to concede. It's not in Jim Crane's DNA to sell. They've never sold outright since Jim Crane's been the owner. But you kind of wonder, do they stand pat? Do they make a marginal acquisition, or do they go for it? Because they're probably losing Framber Valdez in free agency this winter. Jose Altuve, as we just discussed, is not getting any younger. Jeremy Peña is nearing a breakout, and he's getting more expensive. And if this franchise has shown us anything, he's probably not going to be here for much longer either. So it's going to be a fascinating kind of crossroads when the deadline comes, depending on where this team's at as to what they want to do.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they end up doing because of the limited resources they have in that system to go out and make trades. And if you were going to add payroll mid-season anyway, then you would have probably just re-signed Yusei Kikuchi instead of having to take a lesser pitcher on a similar salary to solve that problem. But hey.
Oh, aren't they really close to the luxury tax soon?
I mean, they made Brendan Rodgers sign an advance consent form. He's making $2 million. They kept him. They kept him, so it's good. But like, they were so worried about the luxury tax that they made him sign an advance consent form so they could get rid of that salary if they wanted to after 45 days. But instead of doing that, they traded Rafael Montero to the Braves.
Just to save money,
offloaded $3.5 million of his bloated salary that Jim Crane gave him. So they're about, depending on what outside approximation you look at, they're probably about $5 to $5.5 million under the first threshold. And look, nothing they did this winter and nothing they have done in the first month or so of this season has demonstrated anything but the fact that they want to stay under it, that they don't want to cross the luxury tax. So that'll even make the deadline even more difficult because I think Jim Crane would be willing to pay the luxury tax if he thinks this team is a no doubt, like this team can get to the ALCS and make a run. Nothing that they have shown in the first month and a half suggests that is this, but the AL is so bad. The AL West is not distinguishing itself as a murderer's row. So I mean, who knows? Everyone has a chance at this point. So Jim Crane's been known to authorize some trade deadline splashes, some blockbusters. So I wouldn't count anything out. But the one thing I do feel comfortable saying is as of May 14th, they do not want to cross the CBT and they do not want to pay the tax again.
Yeah, I think they're going to play well, and part of playing well is staying very healthy between now and then for that tune to change. Chandler, we appreciate your time and your insight. Let our listeners know where they can find you on social and where else they can hear you.
Yeah, I'm at Chandler_Rome on X. I'm on Blue Sky too. I don't know my handle. I'm sorry. I should probably know my handle better.
It's just your name.
It's just my name, I think. And then as part of the Foul Territory Network, you can listen to Crush City Territory 3 times a week. Myself and Tyler Stafford and Josh Reddick. Every now and then we get Josh Reddick on once a week too. So everything you want to know about the Astros, about their trade deadline plans, about why Jeremy Peña is elevating the ball more, and about why Christian Walker can't put the ball in play with runners on base. You can hear that all on Crush City Territory if you so choose.
Very cool.
Awesome.
We appreciate your time today, Chandler. We'll catch up with you again soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Thanks again to Chandler Rome for joining us on this episode. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. You can find Eno on Blue Sky, enosaris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. We are back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.